You'll hear people say New Hampshire's taxes are too high, that you can't afford it. The no income tax thing is a myth. In some towns they're right, but what they're missing is this. New Hampshire isn't one tax rate, it's hundreds of them. After 23 years in this market, I'm showing you the towns where the tax bill is lower. Stay with me because most of these are right next to the places everyone already wants to be. Why New Hampshire property taxes vary so dramatically. All right. I've seen this a lot. People come into New Hampshire thinking they're going to save a lot of money because there's no income tax and no sales tax. But then they get here and feel a bit blindsided because they end up paying more in what the town charges. And to be fair, they're not wrong. Even now, the old interest and dividends tax is gone. So yeah, from that angle, it really is a zero income tax state. But then people realize pretty quickly how everything gets paid for. It all comes back to property taxes. Towns here rely on them more than anywhere else in the country. About 61% of local revenue comes from property taxes. That's how everything gets funded. And that's exactly where things start to feel a little off at first. You'll look at one town, the rate seems reasonable. Then you check the next town, and it's almost double. This happens because every town is doing its own thing. There is no single New Hampshire property tax rate. Each town sets its own number based on what it needs to run. Schools, roads, police, fire, services, all of it gets added up and divided by the total value of the property in that town. Schools take up the biggest part. Usually around 60% of your bill goes to local schools. So if a town has more students or higher costs, that shows up in the tax rate pretty fast. Down in southern New Hampshire, especially near the Massachusetts border, towns tend to have more built-out services, bigger school systems, more infrastructure, more amenities to maintain. That's why you see tax rates in the teens and 20s per thousand. The more a town has to offer, the more it costs to run, and that cost shows up directly in your tax bill. Then you head north and the numbers start to change. In the Lakes region, rates tend to come down. You can find some pretty affordable numbers. Go even further north into certain pockets, especially some of the quieter rural towns, and you'll find some of the lowest tax rates in the entire state. If you're picturing a lakeside town with a marina, restaurants, that whole feel, but you don't want the higher tax bill that usually comes with it, in a minute I'll show you exactly where I would look. Stay with me. Now you're trading a few things for that lower number, fewer downtown amenities, and less built-out infrastructure. In a lot of cases, you're still within driving distance of what you need day to day, so it can work really well. Around here, every town sets its own tax rate. It comes down to choosing the right town. If you want to live in a town with a low tax burden and live next to a town that has the hospital and the shopping and the things you like to do, you can do that. You don't have to live in the high tax towns in New Hampshire. So instead of thinking about New Hampshire as one big market, you want to be looking at it town by town. And that's where you start finding places that actually line up with what you want. And that's where we're heading next. Now, if you've been digging into towns on your own, comparing numbers, and this tax piece keeps getting in the way, reach out. I focus on the Lakes region, and I'm part of a team with specialists in the White Mountains and on the Seacoast. So wherever you are looking, you're covered. We're the #1 team in the state, and we've helped a lot of people work this exact decision. And if you want help figuring out which town fits your situation best, my contact info is in the description. All right, let's keep going. Region 1, Southern New Hampshire. Head to the Lakes region instead. A lot of people start their search in Southern New Hampshire. It's the easiest place to land. You've got towns like Nashua, Manchester, Bedford, Goffstown. They're built out. They've got great services, shopping, hospitals, everything you would expect. At first, it all feels like a safe choice. Then you start looking at the tax numbers, and that's usually where things slow down a bit. Bedford is around 16 per thousand. Goffstown is getting close to 21. Hollis is almost 19. That's the range you're dealing with a lot of southern towns. So what I see all the time is people love the area, but the tax number starts pushing them away. And that's when they start thinking New Hampshire might not be a good option at all. But if that's happening, The move is to start looking north. Once you get up into the Lakes region, the numbers look completely different. Tax rates start coming down, and even towns further inland tend to run well below what you'll pay down south. Now, the big concern at that point is what you're giving up. And this is where most people are surprised. The lifestyle in these towns doesn't really drop off. You still have the four seasons, the lakes, the mountains, and the views. The towns still feel like New England towns. You're not losing that part of it. A lot of people think that the Lakes region is just a summer destination, but the people living there year-round see it differently. They know it's one of the best kept secrets in New England. More people are moving there full-time. Carroll County had the highest population growth in the state from 2020 to 2024. That's retirees, remote workers, people making long-term moves. And from a day-to-day standpoint, it still works. You've got access to what you need. People worry they're going to be too far out, but in most cases, that's not how it plays out. Depending on the town, you can still get to Boston within about a 2-hour drive when you need it. So you're not cut off. And if your goal is to push the tax number even lower, I'd keep going north from there. You can find some very low rates. So the way I look at it is pretty simple. Southern New Hampshire gives you the convenience and services, but higher taxes. As you move north, taxes come down and the lifestyle goes up. When you compare what you're paying in the south to towns about an hour north, the difference can be big enough to change your entire retirement budget. And once you start looking in the Lakes region, there are a few specific town swaps that make the difference even bigger. Region number 2, the Lakes region. If you're focused on the Lakes region, you're not deciding between south and north anymore. You're looking at towns that sit right next to each other, because that's where a lot of the savings actually show up. A lot of buyers come in and fall in love with places like Moultonborough. It's one of the most desirable towns on Lake Winnipesaukee. You've got the marina, the waterfront restaurants, that full lakeside feel people are after. The 2025 tax rate just dropped to $8.36 per thousand, but that's because we just had a major reassessment of the town and the values of the properties went up. If you like Moultonborough, but you don't want to pay Moultonborough taxes, I'd be looking just a few minutes north at Tuftonboro. Same lake, same views, same general area. You're still going to Moultonborough for the town docks, the restaurants. Students go to Kingswood Regional there, so you're still tied into the same school system. From a day-to-day standpoint, it feels very similar. You don't have to live in Moultonborough to enjoy Moultonborough. The difference shows up in the tax rate. Tuftonboro is at $6.40 per thousand, one of the lowest in the states. On a home that's $500,000, that's close to $1,000 a year you're keeping, and that adds up over time. And this isn't something people are missing. Tuftonboro is growing. It was one of the fastest growing towns in the county from 2020 to 2024. So more people are making the same move. And if you're thinking about the Seacoast, in a minute, I'll show you what happens there that makes a lot of people rethink it. Now, if you want something with a little more going on day to day, more shops, more walkability, more year-round activity, I'd be looking at a town like Meredith. It's right on Lake Winnipesaukee, still gives you that same Lakes region lifestyle, but with a more active town center. The 2025 rate there is $10.60 per thousand, which is still well below what you're seeing in most southern towns. So you've got options. You're just choosing lifestyle, how much you want going on around you and what number you're comfortable with. That's really how I'd look at this. Same lakes, same roads, same general area, just different tax numbers depending on the town you pick. When you think that way, you start to see a lot more possibilities. Region number 3, go further north. If you like the mountains, but you don't want to pay the higher numbers that come with the busiest towns, this is where I'd be looking. Most people start in North Conway. It's the main hub of the White Mountains. You've got outlet shopping, ski access, restaurants, and on a fall weekend, Route 16 is packed. There's always activities there. This is a great area, but the tax rate is $11.54 per thousand. You're paying that for the convenience and that traffic. So instead of North Conway, I'd be looking just a few minutes up the road at Bartlett. Same general area, same access to the mountains, same ski access to Attitash, same river running through the valley, but the feeling is different. It's quieter, more residential, less traffic. Bartlett is around $6 per thousand. On a $400,000 home, that's a $2,200 savings, and that money stays in your pocket. So you're still using North Conway when you want it. Restaurants, shops, anything you need is right there. You're just not carrying the same tax bill. You get the White Mountains without paying the White Mountains prices on your tax bill. Another place I'd look at in the same range is Freedom. It's over in the Ossipee area, more spread out, quieter, but still close to both lakes and mountains. The 2025 tax rate is around $7.39 per thousand. If you're focused on the numbers, but still want that outdoor access, that's a really solid option. But in some cases, the more expensive the town, the lower the tax rate gets. I'll show you a clear example of that in a minute. Now, if your goal is to push the tax number even lower, I'd keep going north from there. That's where I'd be looking at places up in Coos County and the upper part of the state. That's where some of the lowest tax rates in New Hampshire show up, specifically in more rural, remote towns like Dummer, Pittsburgh, and Randolph, where the tax rates sit around $9 to $11 per thousand, and the assessed values of the homes are lower than the southern part of the state, so your net is much lower up north than it is down south. Not every town up there is low. It really does vary quite a bit, but if you find the right pocket, the numbers can be hard to beat. But you need to be clear on the trade-off. Towns are more remote, services are more limited, and the winters are stronger than what you get further south. However, for the right setup, especially if you're remote or retired, this can work really well. The savings can be pretty big. So if your priority is getting the lowest tax rate possible, going north is the move. The further north you go, the lower the numbers tend to get. Now there's one more region we should take a closer look at, the Seacoast. Why we're not including the Seacoast is one of the first places to look. It makes sense. Portsmouth, Hampton, Rye, Exeter, Dover. The whole stretch is very appealing. You've got the ocean, walkable towns, restaurants, and a lot going on. So if the ocean's on your list, this is usually where you'd start looking. But everything changes when you see the numbers. Portsmouth is around $11.51 per thousand. Exeter is about $18.76 per thousand. Then Lee goes over $27 per thousand, while Dover sits closer to $19.68. A lot of that comes down to demand, being close to Massachusetts and having strong amenities and services to maintain. So right away, you're dealing with higher numbers across most of this area. If being near the ocean is a priority, you can absolutely make it work. Just don't expect a bargain on the tax side. Now there's one spot that stands out when you start digging into the numbers. Newington is right between Portsmouth and Greenland, but the tax rate is $7.88 per thousand, which is much lower than the surrounding towns. It comes down to what's in the town. Newington has a large commercial and industrial base, mainly ties to Pease Trade Port. More than 75% of the taxable value comes from commercial property. That means homeowners are covering a smaller share compared to nearby towns. That's why the number looks so different. So in this case, the commercial base is doing most of the heavy lifting. At the same time, there's a trade-off. Newington is small. There aren't many homes, and the residential part of the town is very limited. So for most buyers, it's not something you can easily rely on as a main option. But it does show you how different towns get to their tax rates in different ways. In Newington, it's the commercial base carrying a lot of the load. In other towns, it comes from different factors. But there are a few towns where the numbers work in a whole different way. Why some of the wealthiest towns have the lowest tax rates. You would think the most expensive towns would have the highest property taxes. But in New Hampshire, that's not always how it works. Take a town like Moultonborough. You're on Lake Winnipesaukee, you have waterfront on Squam, you're close to Castle in the Clouds, it's a high value area. Then you look at the 2025 tax rate and it's $5.33 per thousand, one of the very lowest for any incorporated town in the state. It feels like it should be the other way around. What's actually driving this is the value of the real estate in the town. About 60% of the homes in Moultonborough are seasonal or second homes. The town has 66 miles of shoreline, more than anywhere else in New Hampshire. That's a lot of homes right on the water or have water access. So the waterfront houses carry the high values. When the town adds up all the property values, those homes push that number way up. Then the town spreads its budget across a larger total. And that's what brings the tax rate down. The thing is, a lot of those homes aren't usually year-round. Owners aren't using the services in the winter the same way full-time residents would. School costs stay lower, services stay manageable, and that helps keeps the tax rate down. At the end, someone living a mile off the lake in Moultonborough benefits from those waterfront properties nearby, because the higher value homes are carrying a larger share of the tax base. It's not that the wealthy homeowners are getting a break. Actually, the value of the real estate around them is doing the work. Also, the flip side is just as important. In the towns where the property values are lower, the rate has to go higher to raise the same amount of money. This shows up all across New Hampshire. The Fiscal Policy Institute pointed out that things like lakefront or ski access push property values up, and that helps bring the rate down across the town. You see the same pattern in Newcastle on the Seacoast, where the average home prices are close to $3 million, and the tax rate is about $5.73 per thousand. And in places like Bartlett, where ski access supports nearby property values in a similar way. So in New Hampshire, a higher priced town doesn't always mean higher property taxes. In most cases, it can work the other way. The lowest tax towns are out there. You just need to know where you're looking. Once you do, you start seeing where the real value is. You can start looking at this for yourself by searching the listings filtered by tax rate on the Dow Group website. I'll put the link below. That's a great place to start. If you're trying to figure out a specific town that matches your budget and lifestyle, shoot me an email at adam@thedowgroup.com and I'll pull together options based on your situation. We do this every day across the Lakes region, mountains, and seacoast of New Hampshire. And if you want to see why New Hampshire property values are expected to hold and grow, I've linked a video here that breaks it down and ties it all together. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.